I think we are going to be part of a jury witnessing a trial about a tortured poet, and our protagonist here is kindly giving us some evidence for us to review. Just the concept of a muse to me feels tortured. This is very much showing us the internal state of our protagonist. There has been a dimming of a light. Coincidence? Perhaps. If it's Taylor, I don't know. It just makes me think of a war. It's like a medieval war. She knows them well. That's why she's the chairman. She's the CEO of Dating Art Bros. Battlefield here is this album. All is fair in love and poetry. She, I guess, always sees the end before she begins. The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift is coming out on April 19th, and we are all shook. We are all shook. Today we are going to be analyzing the released lyrics. I'm assuming these are lyrics. It's kind of like a blurb, but I think they're lyrics. Her album has not been released yet. I am doing a mini series on my channel. 2 of them have already been posted. One analyzing the album name, The Tortured Poets Department. One analyzing the album imagery, the album artwork. In my upcoming video, I'm going to be analyzing the track list. If you're new here, I analyze lyrics through the lens of literary analysis, concentrating on things like diction, metaphors, imagery, etc. Cover different artists, but a lot of Taylor Swift. We are close to 50 Taylor Swift analyses. I'll link my playlist down below. And let's get started. Let's begin again.mp3. Touching upon my 2 prior videos very briefly, so far I am interpreting the Tortured Poets Department as a department that is investigating something. I don't think it's like an English department. I think it's like an investigative department, and I explain and break down why I came to that conclusion in my previous videos. This could be an investigation of 2 things in my opinion. Either the protagonist, so Taylor's perspective, was a tortured poet and is doing a self-analysis, or this department is analyzing other tortured poets that were the protagonist's former lovers. Perhaps one specific former lover. I'm thinking about a former lover that was in a group chat by the name of the Tortured Man Group. Maybe him, or maybe this is a retrospective of multiple tortured poets, tortured artists, lyricists that this protagonist has dated in the past. Lots of different ways to analyze this. The reason I think this is more of an investigative sort of album and department is because of the album imagery within this actual, lyric release or lyric teaser. There's a manila folder. Usually when there's a manila folder in movies, it contains things that are part of an investigation, like pieces of evidence. And also in the lyrics we're going to be analyzing today, we literally have the diction evidence. This is a investigative body of work. Again, I think we are going to be part of a jury witnessing a trial about a tortured poet, and our protagonist here is kindly giving us some evidence for us to review to come to a conclusion. Let's see what she says. Before I dive in, I want to remind you this is just my interpretation. I don't really have much context, so we will probably be analyzing this again once the album is released. And so I enter into evidence, my tarnished coat of arms. Let's talk about and so. If you have watched my videos, you know how much I love it when we have lyrics starting with the word and. I love it so much. It is a fragment of a thought. We are coming in after stuff has already gone down. We are like entering within the midst of something occurring. If you have ever listened to your English teachers, they tell you you should never start a sentence with the word and, but I love it in lyrics and I love it in poetry. I find it kind of angsty and moody. I vibe with this really hard. In this context, the phrase and so sounds like the protagonist maybe is coming to a conclusion of sorts herself and wants to express that conclusion to us by showing us pieces of evidence. I imagine the protagonist sighing when she says this. And so, or and so. It, to me, feels like a release of some sort. Is the protagonist entering evidence because she wants to? Is she telling on someone, or was she forced to do this? For instance, was she called in to enter evidence? It's like a trial. What was the cause of this trial? What was the cause for the need for evidence? This seems like a proceeding that happens within an institution, like maybe a courtroom. That's why, again, I don't think this is like an English department of poets. This is something that is like an investigation, and our protagonist seems to have been a witness in whatever we are investigating here. She has been in on the action. And so I enter into evidence. The protagonist lists out the things she is entering into evidence. There are 5 things that she's entering. She's entering her tarnished coat of arms, her muses, her talismans and charms. She's also entering into evidence love bombs, specifically the ticking of love bombs, or the tick, tick, tick of love bombs. And she's also entering into evidence her veins, more specifically the contents of her veins, the metaphorical contents. Our protagonist has a lot of evidence for whatever argument is trying to be supported within these lyrics. This also may not be lyrics. This may be like a poem. You know how Reputation had the poem, Why She Disappeared? It could be that. There's a lot to talk about. Let's just dive in. There's a lot here. If this is an indication of the type of lyricism we're gonna have, my videos for these song analyses are gonna be so long, and my videos are usually really, really long. So I don't know. I'm excited though. Okay, let's talk about the first piece of evidence our protagonist is presenting us with. And so I enter into evidence my tarnished coat of arms. Let's define coat of arms. And I want to preface this by saying there's a lot of medieval diction in this song, like coat of arms. And this reminds me of Taylor's album Speak Now, which had a lot of diction about kings and kingdoms. That was a theme within that album. And the music video for Bejeweled, it ended in a medieval sort of way with that protagonist coming out in her castle and showing us her kingdom. And it felt very medieval, right? At the beginning and at the end. This is a motif that is pretty strong within the Taylor Swift universe. So I am intrigued to see if this is going to be prevalent on this album. We did have a little bit of that theme present during the Folklore Evermore era. I'm thinking about Willow vibes. So it's not something that hasn't been present in her recent works, but I associate it more with Taylor's earlier works. That's definitely something I'm going to be looking for when the Tortured Poets Department album comes out. Coat of arms is a symbol that's often within a shield that represents a specific family or person. Coat of arms can have a few different purposes. It can distinguish one knight from another on a battlefield. It's like a logo or like your team uniform. It allows you to know like who's who, so you don't end up like casually killing a member of your own team, because that's counterproductive in the context of war. Also, this does bring forth war imagery a little bit, which is violent and not great. Not great at all, especially in the context of a relationship. Other purposes of coats of arms. Certain coats of arms are associated with specific individuals, so they're kind of like an identifier even off of the battlefield. It can be used to depict power, wealth, and the achievements of that family. And this is something that existed and was prevalent in the medieval times. Historic homes in Britain have coats of arms that are part of their architecture. For example, they're part of stained glass within the homes. And it's interesting that we're talking about Great Britain because one of the former lovers of this protagonist is a London boy. There's a song on this album about saying farewell, goodbye to London. Coincidence? Perhaps. If it's Taylor, I don't know. Lots of intentionality with Taylor's work. So IDK, that is yet to be determined. No men in the same region can wear the same types of coat of arms. It's very much an identifier of someone. Let's also look up the word tarnished before I interpret this lyric. Tarnished means to lose the luster or shine of something. Another definition is to make or become less valuable or respected. Interesting definitions. Taylor literally memorized the dictionary because the words she uses always fit in perfectly with the metaphors she chooses. Oh my God, I accidentally was a poet right now. I am not tortured though, I'm chill. The chill poets department. Coats of arms here in the context of our protagonist can represent our protagonist's identity. They can represent our protagonist's status in terms of power, wealth, achievements. And when we think about identity, we can think about existential things. We can think about the health of someone's soul. In my analysis of Coney Island by Taylor Swift, I discussed how I interpret a soul and soulmates and how for me that greatly differs from romantic love and someone's heart. Really briefly, why I'm bringing this up. When I think about identity, which I'm thinking about here because of coat of arms, I think about existential vibes. When I think about identity and existential vibes, I think about the contents of one's soul because I view the soul as the innermost part of someone's being. I view the soul as part of your identity, and I view issues with your identity, and for me, thereby the soul, as something that's very serious. When you have romantic love that doesn't work out, that is, of course, very heartbreaking and very sad. Romantic love has a lot of value and it's very beautiful, but I value identity and your existential self as more important and more valuable because it is you. It's your essence. It's who you are in relation to yourself. When you're talking about romantic love, it's always in relation to another person. But when someone's identity here is being tarnished, I take that very seriously. It's not just heartache and pain due to the loss of a relationship or of a romantic love. It is now starting to affect yourself and your own internal essence. And to me, that's a very terrifying thing to experience. It's murky territory, right? You don't want to mess with your own identity. Since coats of arms were used to identify and distinguish people, the fact that the protagonist's coat of arms have lost their metaphorical shine and luster is a very negative thing. It is perhaps a foreshadow of things to come, or it is a conclusion, a result of things that have already happened. This is very much going to be context dependent on if this is the lyric, on the rest of the song. This is indicating that our protagonist is not in a healthy state of existence. Other things I'm thinking about here, the protagonist feels like she lost respect and, her wealth and accomplishments are being diminished. We can think about wealth, like monetary wealth, but also wealth of talent, wealth of knowledge, wealth of energy. There's lots of ways to think about wealth. There has been a dimming of a light here in regards to our protagonist. It is quite interesting that coat of arms is used to depict this because it just makes me think of a war. In the medieval times, coats of arms did exist outside the context of war, but I am just thinking about war here. I'm thinking about violent diction. Perhaps the protagonist lost her identity in the context of war. Perhaps her coat of arms did protect her during this emotional metaphorical war, but now, even though she survived, the coats of arms she was wearing, they worked to protect her, but they have diminished in value and they are now tarnished. This is very much showing us the internal state of our protagonist. She's not in a good spot, and her emotional state is being used as evidence to prove something. We can also think about diminished value in the context of public perception, since coats of arms are put on the outside of buildings in Britain within stained glass. It can be viewed by other people. Let's move on to the next lyric. My muses acquired like bruises. Let's define some words. A muse is a source of creative inspiration for an artist. A muse is often a person, and it's usually someone the artist is romantically involved with. You are going to be very much intimately involved with your romantic partner, both physically but also emotionally as well, and just energetically, existentially, spiritually, etc., just by being in a relationship with them. But when they are also the source, or not the source, but perhaps the inspiration of your art, it's an even more intense, immersive, intimate sort of relationship dynamic. Just the concept of a muse to me feels tortured. It feels kind of like twisted in a way. I never will think of a muse as something that's romantic. I think some people can, and I think you can think about it in that way. It is definitely a testament to the love if someone is able to inspire something very beautiful and profound. I've never felt like being someone's muse is like cute. And again, this is just my own interpretation. If you disagree, it's totally cool, totally valid. I just associate a sort of heaviness with like being someone's muse. Our protagonist here had muses. She's not saying that she was the muse, but there's a tortured sort of feeling about like the dynamic between a muse and an artist. Codependency, maybe, but like also not. It kind of blurs the lines because I feel like if you're an artist, you have your artistic and your creative life, and then you have your personal life, but your personal life is going to very strongly influence the art that you create, no matter what medium. If you're a sculptor, if you're a writer, if you are a painter, whatever. Things like that will influence your art. So it's like your life is your art. So your muse's life. But when it's one singular person, there's a sense of closeness and intertwinedness that to me feels heavy. It's just an interesting dynamic. I think people may romanticize it. It's kind of like how I feel about gold. I talked about that when I analyzed a few songs on Evermore, Gold Rush, Champagne Problems. Gold is cute, but I don't think gold is romantic because it's heavy. It feels like lackluster metaphorically, kind of like King Midas. Everything he touched turned to gold. Champagne Problems on MP3, your Midas touch on the Chevy door. Remember Flesh in Your Flannel Cure, one of my favorite bridges. My analysis will be linked below of that song. Something turning into gold, if you like touch a person and they turn to gold, they're not going to be alive. It's void of like lively energy, which to me is not positive. The way I feel about gold in that context is how I feel about a muse and artist relationship. So when it's stated here that the protagonist's muses were acquired like bruises, that's not surprising to me, because a bruise is, like an injury. It is an injury. You can get a bruise in many ways. Oftentimes, maybe you're struck by something that's heavy. So maybe she was struck by a heavy emotional relationship and that caused an emotional bruise. I'm going to talk about bruises more, but I have a few more things I want to say. Look at the word muses. It is plural. It is plural. In my prior video where I analyzed the album artwork here, I talked about how the fact that it's black and white may suggest that this album is not about just one tortured poet. It's about any tortured poet the protagonist has dated. I thought about this because one tortured poet, some may argue he's a tortured poet, that our protagonist has been linked with is in a band that exclusively had black and white music videos for a very long time. Still have the black and white motif going on. I'm talking about Maddie Healy. I don't know if he inspired anything on this album. He maybe did not. I have no idea. Your girl is not psychic, right? But this could be, like I said, more of just a type of person our protagonist has dated. That is confirmed further for me here because muses is plural. I also want to talk about the word acquired because it's important. It makes me feel some type of way, and it really contributes to the connotation and the tone of these lyrics or this poem. Let's look at the dictionary definition of acquired. It means to obtain an asset. An asset. One could argue that a muse is an asset when you obtain an asset or object for oneself. Did it say person in that definition? It did not. It did not. It said an asset or an object. It's dehumanizing, right? To be a muse, I think, is kind of dehumanizing. And I'm not commenting on like Taylor having muses. I think that sort of relationship dynamic can exist in a healthy way and in a light way. But just from my own personal interpretation, never having been in a muse-artist relationship, that's how I think about it, more like metaphorically and conceptually, but could have been not a heavy thing for our protagonist, or maybe it was good until it went bad. Maybe the heaviness of this relationship of a muse and an artist is dependent on if and how that relationship ends. This seems dehumanizing to the muses here that are being acquired. Also, it says for oneself. It's like you're collecting people. The word acquired for me means to collect. What do people collect? They collect like stamps, they collect state quarters. What else can you collect? You can collect salt and pepper shakers, which is something I've accidentally started doing. I have really cute ones. You can collect a lot of things, but to collect muses or to collect people, that sounds not right, in my opinion. That sounds heavy. It's like the muses this protagonist has had have left their mark on her, like a bruise would. The fact that they have left their mark means that she has acquired them. So maybe she did not go into these relationships with these lovers who became muses with the intention of acquiring them in this, kind of dystopian-like way, dehumanizing way, but that's what ended up happening because her muses were tortured poets. To me, the word acquired here does not have a positive or pure connotation at all. I associate acquiring something with the concept and energy of a gray area. It's void of anything lively. And again, I'm not saying this is the intention of the protagonist. It was like a byproduct of these past relationships. That's why they're bruises. You wouldn't intentionally give yourself a bruise, right? You enter into relationships, I hope, with good and positive intentions, but sometimes they just turn out a way that you don't expect. Let's talk about a bruise now. A bruise is a visible result of an injury. More like literally, a bruise is the result of ruptured blood vessels, like underneath your skin. Sometimes when you injure yourself, you'll have like a cut and the blood will come out of your body. But with a bruise, the blood vessel is still being ruptured, but that blood is remaining underneath your skin. So it's kind of like pain that hasn't been released. Pain that has not been released, but is still visible, so you're still aware of it. If you press down on a bruise, sometimes it may hurt a little bit more. Bruises often take time to heal. Some people may bruise easily, others may not. She's collected this pain that is stuck within her body. They say the body can hold trauma. Her body is holding on to the pain caused by these past relationships with these tortured poets. They're kind of like battle wounds. all is fair in love and war. But like this album is telling us, all is fair in love and poetry. Poetry here is being aligned with war. In this album, poetry is war. Our protagonist's words are her sword. In Miss Americana, Taylor talked about how she always hopes to have a sharp pen. That sharp pen is like a sharp sword in this album. And the words that she's writing, the lyrics, the poetry are war. Her weapon of choice are words and metaphors and imagery and symbols and motifs and themes. This is a well thought out concept from what I see so far. I always love analyzing Taylor because all of her metaphors logically work. Whenever I look up definitions of things and whenever I look up themes and symbols, the history behind certain symbols, the Wikipedia pages, the encyclopedia pages, they all fit in with a song really well. It's crafted very perfectly in a very clean and precise way. It is so satisfying to analyze Taylor's work because it is clean and correct. Art can never be right or wrong, but every part just fits together so perfectly. Like everything logically, like all the metaphors and figurative things fit together logically. It's like the puzzle pieces fit together. She is an exceptional writer. I one day hope she writes like a novel or poetry. I really hope that this album is gonna have a lot of figurative language similar to folklore. That would be my dream, honestly. And I'm excited based on what we're seeing so far. So our protagonist here seems to be suffering in pain with no outlet. She has multiple bruises caused by her past love, her past muses, and these are also part of the evidence she is turning in. Then it says, my talismans and charms. We have magical / mystical diction here. Talismans and charms. When we have magical diction, I think about Evermore. I think about Willow. I will link my Willow lyric analysis and music video analysis below. We get more into that there. There's two ways to read this line here, my talismans and charms. It could be another type of evidence the protagonist is turning in, or it could be referring to the line previous. So let me just read from the beginning really quick. And so I enter into evidence, my tarnished coat of arms, my muses acquired like bruises, my talismans and charms. The bruises could be described as talismans and charms here. So my talismans and charms could be referring to the muses acquired like bruises. So although these bruises are a source of pain, they could be sources of magic for the protagonist, or it could be standalone. Honestly, either interpretation could work. Let's define talisman and charms. A talisman is an object like an inscribed ring or a stone thought to have magic powers to bring good luck. Another definition of a talisman: any object, often portable, with religious or magical powers intended to protect, heal, or harm individuals they are made for. Let's define charms. A charm can refer to a practice or expression believed to have magic power, similar to an incantation or a spell. Another definition is the chanting or reciting of a magic spell. Here, the charms would be our protagonist's lyrics and music. The diction here makes me think of the act of songwriting and music making and singing, just viewing that whole process in a magical way. It makes it seem mysterious in a way. It kind of gives me folklore vibes. Spells and charms and things like that often exist in folklore. We have an album called Folklore, but in literal folklore, these are themes that are present. You know, I've talked about this before in my other analyses, where when something has magic associated with it, when something is mysterious, or when something has like fate associated with it, I often view that thing as having more value and being more profound. It's not something random. It has magic associated with it, right? It's something that is like fated, or it's something that happened in the past. It has folklore vibes. For some reason, when we talk about things happening in the past, it sometimes just seems more important and more substantial, perhaps because if it happened in the past, there must be a reason we're still bringing it up. So when I hear diction that's associated with magic, and more specifically the types of magic that maybe are in stories that are like folklore, which often happen in the past, it makes whatever is being discussed here have more value and more significance, in my opinion. How I'm interpreting this is the muses that are acquired like bruises, the pain, these past relationships, perhaps these past tortured poet lovers are the talismans for our protagonist. They are the muses, which are acquired. Since they're acquired, they're kind of like objects that allow our protagonist to create these charms for herself and to create these incantations, which are her music, her lyrics. The whole process of being inspired by her muses and creating her art is a magical experience. And that gives more significance and not validity, but more oomph to her art, in my opinion. It's like a sacred process. It's a process that's like a ritual. It's something that's very important to the protagonist. It's like a process that she respects. Those are some things I'm thinking of here. Then it says the tick, tick, tick of love bombs. More violent diction. Bombs can be used in war. Tick, tick, tick. That is quite literally the sound that a bomb would make. The way that this is spaced out here is interesting as well. The spacing, in my opinion, reflects the elapsed time before the love bomb goes off and explodes, kind of descending down, but it's moving forward. When you go forward in a line, you're getting closer to like the end of a sentence. So you're getting closer to the love bomb going off, right? So it's like tick, tick, tick. It's closer to the end, closer to like the period of the sentence, the end of the relationship. That's how I view it personally. Love bombs are plural. This can be interpreted in two different ways, in my opinion. This can be referring to love bombing, which is, by definition, the action or practice of lavishing someone with attention or affection, especially in order to influence or manipulate them. This is something that is prevalent in relationships that are very toxic. This is often coupled with gaslighting later on in the relationship, or this could just refer to a love that's always been under pressure in one way or another. These loves that existed under pressure, they existed in like a volatile context. After a while, it can only take so much. It'll explode. When there's an explosion, there is destruction. So the love was destroyed. The tick, 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 it's ominous. It's foreshadowing. It's showing that all of these loves had to end. They were like fated to end. The tick, tick, tick is like the protagonist hearing and reliving the moments before it ended, but the sound makes me think that she knew they were ending. Like none of them were a surprise. She, I guess, always sees the end before she begins. Coat of arms, bruises, talismans and charms, love bombs. It's like a medieval war. And I think medieval war is like, I would argue, more gruesome. Right now, you have like technology, you have other things to protect you. But back then, you're like literally on horses with swords and there was just like blood everywhere. I feel like it's more gruesome. This next line is so cool. Let's analyze it. My veins of pitch black ink. The protagonist is offering up the metaphorical contents of her veins. There is a quote at the very end of Miss Americana, which is Taylor Swift's documentary. Taylor says this. She stated, "I want to still have a sharp pen and a thin skin and an open heart." The sharp pen sticks out to me, and I mentioned this earlier. Taylor, our protagonist here, sees the value of a sharp pen. Words can kill. To quote a Taylor Swift lyric, "My words shoot to kill when I'm mad." I have a lot of regret about that. Taylor knows that her words can be very pointed. Her words are her weapon. She is a wordsmith, after all. Is swordsmith like a word? Swordsmith? I'm not going to Google it, but if we do, a wordsmith is parallel to that. Anyways, Taylor's weapon of choice are words, right? They're her charms. Her pen is sharp. Her sword is sharp. I already stated this in this video. Her words are her weapon in this war. Battlefield here is not an actual battlefield. Battlefield here is this album. It is the lyrics here. All is fair in love and poetry. Let's talk about veins. Veins are blood vessels. They carry your life source, which is blood. Your blood needs to be pumping throughout your body to keep you alive. Because my bachelor's degree is in biology, I'm gonna get scientific for a moment and finally use my degree for something. Veins versus arteries. Arteries begin with the letter A, so they take blood away from the heart. Veins take blood toward your heart. I don't think this is like part of the thinking behind these lyrics, but like I said, I want to use my degree for something. So veins take blood towards the heart. We can think about an emotional heart here, and when I think about a heart, I think about romantic love. So to extrapolate this out, honestly, way too far, and to overanalyze this way too much, the pitch black ink is going towards the protagonist's emotional heart, and her emotional heart is going to reflect and think and take that pitch black ink and use her sharp pen, her sword, and write words that are charged with emotions and may start a war, may end a war. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting interpretation. Yay, science. Like I mentioned, your blood is really important. It carries oxygen and nutrients all throughout your body. All of your cells need access to this to work and for you to be alive and healthy. Here, the protagonist's veins, her life source, are not blood cells, right? No oxygen. It's pitch black ink. This ink is being used in like, oh my God, I just forgot what those pens are called. Like the pens that have like an ink pen, which again gives me medieval vibes. Maybe like a feather pen, like a feather ink pen. But her life source is the ink that is used to write words. She understands things through words. She interprets things through words. Taylor has said that for her, writing songs is the same thing as taking a picture. It's like a memory. And I understand this myself. I don't work as an artist, but for me, writing is something that has always been part of like how I identify myself, even though it's like a hobby just for my own personal life. I very much understand things through words. When I need to think through things, it's done through writing and through words specifically. So for me, I'm interpreting this in a very like significant, like existential way, because for me, like my identity is words. Words are my identity, just internally for myself. I respect words. I value words. I understand them in a way that's significant to me. And when I need to understand myself and my world, it is through the use of words as well. I think Taylor is similar in that sense. And I think a lot of writers, if not all of them, operate in that way to some degree. For Taylor, it seems to be very significant because it is her life source. I'm not sure I would ever use that metaphor to describe my relationship with words as the ink being in my veins. So I think Taylor is definitely more of a writer than me, but this is a testament to who she is and what fuels her and what keeps her alive. These words came out of like her flesh and blood. These are things that came out of her emotional landscape. These bruises are still stuck within her. The pain is still stuck within her. This is not a random album with just like bops and stuff. This is heavy lyrics that are part of this album. That's what I'm thinking about here. These lyrics on this album, I would assume, are from the depth of this protagonist's emotional world. The ink here is not just black, it is pitch black. So we do have some dark imagery here. That could be negative, but in my opinion, this is just showcasing the sureness of our protagonist and what she is going to be writing, the poetry that is going to be this war. It's like her lyrics are going to be written in bold and like underlined and like capitalized. This is an ink pen, so you can't erase it. There is a sureness present here. When you write something, if your emotions are like pure and raw, you're not really going to have many edits when you write something out. Like it's just going to be what you're feeling and you're going to know what you're feeling. And I feel like if you're an experienced and talented wordsmith, which is how I think about Taylor Swift, you are just going to get your emotions down and the metaphors down like on the first or second draft because you're feeling it in real time. I know that there's like an argument within like English and literature and poetry that, you know, are we overanalyzing things? Was the author's intent to even have us track the color purple in this book or the light imagery in this book or water imagery? I think that it depends, but I also think that if someone thinks and views life in a metaphorical way, that when they are feeling a specific emotion, they are going to naturally emote things in a figurative way, and they're naturally going to describe their emotions in a figurative way using metaphors and using the appropriate diction. It's going to naturally flow out of them if that emotion is present in their being at that time. This is like not a guess. This is how I am. Not to the caliber of Taylor Swift, but I have felt that. So to me, the fact that this protagonist's ink is pitch black, it means she's very sure. She is emotionally filled to the brim, and those emotions are going to pour out. And when they do, it's going to be pitch black ink, right? These bruises are there, but she may get a cut now where the blood, the pitch black ink is going to flow out. And she's going to use that pool of pitch black ink with her feather medieval pen to write some words that cannot be erased. They're not going to be crossed out because she's feeling it in real time. The metaphors are going to be on point. The diction's going to be on point. The imagery is going to be precise and pointed like a sword. This is real and this is raw. Those are some of the thoughts that I had about that line. Then it says, all's fair in love and poetry. I have discussed that line many times. This is Taylor's current Instagram bio. Again, poetry here is war. Her pen is her sword. The ink here, the pitch black ink, is the blood that maybe was metaphorically spilled for our protagonist. If she gets cut, she's going to wield her sharp pen and use it as a weapon. Her form of fighting, her war, is poetry. Then it says, sincerely. How sincere? The chairman of the tortured poets department. Now this is really intriguing because this protagonist is turning in evidence into like an investigative institution, but she herself is the chairman of a department. So is this tortured poets department investigating? Because the chairman wouldn't be turning it into their own department, would they? Is this a different investigative department that we are considering here? Is our protagonist the chairman of the tortured poets department because she herself was a tortured poet or is a tortured poet, or she herself has been in relationships with past muses who have all been tortured artists or poets in some way? She is the expert of dating this type of person. She knows them well. That's why she is the chairman. She is the CEO of Dating Art Bros, perhaps. Maybe that's why this is a department. Maybe this isn't even the investigative department, but it's being investigated by a different department. This album seems to be very well thought out. The metaphors on this album, I feel like, are going to be very satisfying extended metaphors. And I think this album is going to have a lot of fun things to track, like symbols, addiction, imagery, etc. I'm really stoked for this. I was hoping Taylor would do an album that's more like lyric heavy, more figurative. I hope that's what this is. I sincerely hope so. We never know what Tay-Tay is up to. It's gonna be good. I just am very intrigued by everything we've been presented with so far. Please tell me what you make of these lyrics so far. I think this is a lyric, or this poem so far. Stay tuned for my other video in this mini series analyzing all of the information we have so far about the Tortured Poets Department. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. I will see you next time. Bye.